Hi, welcome back to Unique Minds of the Okanagan. I'm Robb. And we're on location in Kelowna with DJ Thistle, one of Kelowna's top vinyl DJs. It's good to have you.
Well, hello, thanks for having me, yes.
No worries. Why don't we dive in right away with who you are, where you're from, and how you got into music.
Sure. My name is Matt, DJ Thistle. I'm from Kelowna, kind of lived other places in BC when I was younger, live on the west side now, but Okanagan is my home base. And I got into DJing when I was like 18, so 45 now, can do the math from there. Kind of was around for the original rave explosion, and that's where I started playing music, even though I was also into hip hop and stuff like that. It's just kind of grown from there into all different facets, owning a record store, producing. I taught at Cato when like Excision and Datsik and Downlink and people like that all went through. So it's just over many years of staying in the industry, I've got to just see and do so much. It's one of those things where like, just like staying in it gets you so much experience, right? It's been awesome.
What was the first thing that got you into music? Who was the first artist?
I can't say what the first artist that got really me into music was, but it would probably be influenced from my dad because he worked in the music industry as well. So he was a guitar tech in the 80s and early 90s. So like whether it was, I think it was like more like bar bands. So in like the 80s and early 90s, Vancouver had a huge rock and roll scene, and there was like Bon Jovi, huge bands used to record there as well too. So the culture was good. So in the bar band scene, when it was very big, there would be guys, the roadie type people. And my dad ended up getting into the position of guitar tech. So just making sure all the guitars sounded good before the show and then during the show. And then he grew from there. He got to work for people like Colin James, and then tour with them, and like it was the big band era too, when they had all the horns and everything. And he ended up working for Jethro Tull, and like doing that was like touring with the Rolling Stones and stuff. So exposure that way was really amazing. Like my parents separated when I was young, but I still linked up with that enough to get to see that world. And, when he came through Kelowna with Colin James, I think I was like 12 or 13, maybe 13, 14. And I got to go into, I think it was Flashbacks at the time still. So I got to go in and just like check it out and see the daytime rehearsal and everything. So all that stuff was just like awesome to get me into music, I guess. And I always enjoyed listening to music. Both my grandparents on each side like went out dancing into their 80s until they were dead, basically, right? Like till their last years. So just like that whole vibrancy of music and artsiness has just kind of been there, and I love doing it.
That's funny because, well, it's not funny. It's really cool to have parents who are in music, because it's definitely a big push. And especially ones who perform or work behind the scenes, because it sets you on that road to be a musician. Like my mom did cover bands for my whole life, and watching her at her band practices really made me be a musician. And music kind of transcends, doesn't matter what genre you start with. You tend to eventually get through every genre and fall in love with what pieces of each one create your music.
Yeah.
And with hip hop, it's almost endless, because you can take a drum loop from samples from anywhere and create this masterpiece that people wouldn't even really, like Riz as a master at it, for taking 3 seconds of a song that you wouldn't even know is from, like, is a part that no one would use, and turning that into the main melody.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes music so diverse, and especially DJs, extremely diverse. Because being a musician who plays instruments is one thing, but to be able to hear music in other elements that you can take from and create music is, to me, mind-blowing. And hip-hop is such a big movement and has been for a long time, but you see it ebb and flow, and I think we're on like a high, getting back to another high point, especially with DJs and cut DJs, which is like one of the hardest things in my mind is to scratch.
Yeah.
To understand, like, when you watch a DJ who, like A-Track or, you know, DJs who are high-level scratching, it's mind-blowing, and you've competed
Yes.
doing so.
Yeah.
How did you... This is kind of where I really want to dive into, because it's an art form that I've never got to sit and talk with someone.
Sure,
Just
yeah.
watching YouTube videos.
Turntablism would be the correct
yes,
term,
and turntablism is, to me, is mind-blowing. Like, when Bliss and Esso came through at Flashbacks, God, 12 years ago or something like that, watching ISM while I was on stage, it kind of introduced me to it. You always see DJs. So how did you get into scratching?
Let me dive into the memory bank on that one. How did I get into scratching specifically? So I got into DJing not to DJ. I had never, so fun fact, I guess, to start it off with, my first rave was playing. I wasn't part of the like going out and party culture kind of thing before that. I grew up with more hard rock and metal because of my dad, right? But there was also Bob Marley records and things like that were around when I was a kid. So there was a little bit of variety, but just that whole rock element was what was popular in my age growing up, late 80s, early 90s. And then exposure to hip-hop and rap music started super young, like 91, 92, so I'm like 11 or 12. And that just gave me something in the background that was different than all my friends that were into rock music and then grunge, right? Because that whole era then happened next. But I was the only one kind of in the background. I mean, maybe they'd listen to Beastie Boys, right? But I actually listened to hip-hop too. And then I think I must have been like 13. It was like super late night on Much Music, and The Prodigy came on. And I was like, what is this music? And it was that explosion of rave sound and also not just like house music, but like breakbeats, and what ended up turning into jungle and drum and bass, which is where I gravitated towards. And a lot of people that probably you might even know too from like the metal type scene would come to drum and bass shows because it was the most, I don't know, like aggressive, but also like house music. As much as there's like soul and flow and groove to it, drum and bass can have like lots of like harmony and things going on too. There's like the Brazilian side of it, the super heavy side of it, the jungle side of it. So just like the diversity brought me in too. So I've got the metal thing going on. I've got the liking a bit of hip hop, this, oh my God, what is breakbeats and rave stuff going on? So I graduate, I'm 17, almost 18. I start university. I like make my first mixtape off of just whatever I even had at the time. And then I bought like belt drive turntables, right? And just garbage like that. And I think it was when I was first buying records, I came across the turntablism scratch records, whether it be the Battle Tools or DJs that were just scratching a vocal, scratching a kick and a drum, and then layering it all in a sampler back then, and then making music that was all sample based, right? So that was super cool to me. Probably like Kid Koala probably would have been the first real and DJ Shadow, and then I saw the battle side, which was A-Track and DJ Craze, and then Craze to this day is still like the guy. And so when I was starting to scratch from seeing that artistic Kid Koala style, and then I saw the battle style, that just made me want to round it all out. And I had this house where, you know, it's like 4 or 5 roommates, and I had like the downstairs room that had this big walk-in closet. So I had bought turntables. I'm like 19, and I just locked myself in the closet, actually, for like 2 years pretty much, and just practice and practice and practice, and worked and practice and worked and practice and worked and practice. That's all I did was work and practice. And then it just went from there, right? I just thought it was awesome. It was just another part of the musical journey, and because I was young and decided to spend my money on music and turntables and stuff and not snowboarding and whatever. Like, it was a conscious choice of, right, like, you've got X amount of dollars on a crappy minimum wage job. What am I going to do with my spare time? And I wanted to do the music stuff. And then it was like a year later, sort of like my scholarship type money was hitting its ends for university, and university I just wasn't feeling it. I didn't like just all the extra stuff I had to do. I was great at the classes that I wanted to be there and major in. All the other stuff seemed like fluff, and I was like, music's going good. So I dropped out of school, I pivoted, and then I worked 3 jobs and opened up a record store. So I just busted my rear end for like a year, worked like 65, 70 hours a week, and opened up this tiny little store downtown Kelowna, and it was upstairs in an office building. It wasn't even like, just walk into the cool record store, right? It was like, you have to be quiet. There's only headphones. But because it was a tiny little like 200 square foot space, I was able to offer product cheaper than everywhere else. So the store did well. We stayed open. A couple other shops closed down. We moved into like what was then the place that had always been a record store. So we kind of took it over, front side. And then the internet became very obvious that it was going to ruin music. I think HMV had closed down nationally. There was Sam the Record Man. Sam the Record Man had closed down nationally. And there was just some HMVs left and some A&B sounds. I saw the writing on the wall and thought, you know what? I don't need to lose money. The store's still doing well. I'm just going to kind of pull out. And then that was that part of the venture. But so much was learned and gained on the turntablism, hip hop, and then all the knowledge of the culture, which is probably a question we'll get to later. But like, the store was what I think, I call it like a hub. And I find that everything being digital now, there's digital hubs, but there's not physical hubs really. So the record shop allowed people to buy music, and people wanted to buy the music, and then they also wanted to hear the music. So we had a club night each Friday night, and I would often play a lot of the new records that we would get in on the store on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. So it was like you could come out and hear the new music loud and then go into the shop and buy it on Saturday morning. You know what I mean? And it just became this like circular thing of like the club night fed the record shop, and the record shop fed the DJs, and the DJs, and it was awesome, right? And then losing the shop kind of hurt that long term. The night still kept going for a couple more years, and then other people did nights and whatnot. But I find that it's not quite the same anymore. And post-COVID, it's like ridiculous. It's like people I don't want to say people don't dance. They go to the shows, but whether it's like a clubby top 40 thing or even like ravey EDM type shows, it's a lot of just kind of standing around, maybe swaying or bobbing or whatever, but I'm like, people's feet and moving and like dancing like it's the 90s or early 2000s, I don't see that as much. A lot of the older people dance. I see a lot of the younger people, I don't know if they're afraid to because they don't want to be on a camera. Oh my God, this person made a mistake, you know what I mean? Like, just go and have fun. So I think that's like, in terms of like moving forward with the culture, I think like all ages parties and things like that were where rave culture and all that music culture started. And even hip hop music was all youth-based and urban city-based, right? So it's like all these things where the culture is now gone to like the suburbs or online, when really you kind of have to all come into the city and participate together. And then when you participate together, it feels different. You go to an event and be like, oh, like when people talk about the vibe or the atmosphere, well, that's what it is, right? So
there's one thing that I've always, I tried to get into being a DJ at one point, and I was terrible at it. Like, I enjoy producing EDM, but mixing my own stuff was a really big challenge. Trying to write music that you can mix together by yourself. So totally. I kind of gave up on it. Still do it for fun, but I always was very confused as to why DJs were stuck to raves, as where instead of like bands have shows at specific, again, your venues. And I think that that's one thing where you excel at, is you took it in the career way, because you were raised on the grind from the 90s.
Yeah.
So performing at raves is like, for me, I would always look at raves as like the starting point, but like you want to get to the arenas and stuff. Like that's where you want to be as an artist. And it's really hard to go from rave-based to shows. And I find a lot of my friends who do DJing are always stuck to doing the shows at the raves. Mm-hmm. And it's trying to get that venue, that all ages set up show going, where the community's looking at it different almost. Like there's almost like, you hear EDM and you think rave, and there's a negative outlook on it because of
the history.
The history, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like that anymore. I perform at raves all the time, and it
went
so
from
different.
counterculture to corporate sponsored.
Yeah,
it's completely different. Yeah.
And you've seen the evolution, and you're in it, and have made it a career. Mm-hmm. What are the benefits of the growth in the industry, and which aspects have gone negative, if that makes sense?
Sure. I mean, well, I guess it would be like anything in life. When something becomes a movement, or something new and innovative happens, it can be just shunned because it's new, right? So like electric cars seem like a great idea, but a lot of people just don't want to buy one for whatever reason. Like, I don't know why. They just don't want to, right?
Yeah.
We don't even have to have a discussion about possible positive or negative environmental impacts. It's just like, there's all these other benefits that come with it, but still it's just bad, right? So there's just like, there's always pushback against new things, right? So in the beginning, hip hop was bad. And then rave culture was bad. And of course it was. We were going out and using venues that we weren't supposed to use, or empty buildings, or here, once it was like take all the gear out, and a rave happened, not for very long, but in one of the tunnels on the Coquihalla, right?
Okay.
So it was just, let's just find a spot and do something and see how it goes, and then just having fun, right? But it was just, it's almost uncomparable, because how it started then was, you have a lot of, like, I think probably the best example for rave music would be almost comparing early rave music in London to, let's say, early punk in London, where it is a cultural thing, it is a demographic thing, it's a voice against the man in the system. And then as it all became more popular, maybe not even more popular, as it all became more socially acceptable, and as it all became more legal to do, then it also sold out. So punk rock, when I was a kid, I could still see the 70s roots of like anti-establishment. But then I watched, the Lollapalooza type eras started, and then it became super corporate. And then all of a sudden it started, the Sugar Ray pop punk era. I'm just like, what's going on, right? And dance music has really done the same thing, where it was counterculture, it was against everything, it was illegal in buildings, and then it was, okay, we want to make sure people are safe, and we don't want to get, hooped if something happens.
Exactly.
So we found out ways to get insurance and blah, blah, blah. That was like the golden pocket, like late 90s, early 2000s, because found a way to do it legally, but it wasn't epically popular yet, right? And then after it becomes popular, then everyone has these expectations tied to it, and people want to make money off it. And as soon as people want to make money off it, it has to hit all the marks to be more socially acceptable. It almost becomes less inclusive, because early rave culture was a lot of the most, very artistic, very neurodiverse, homeless, disadvantaged, like people looking for places to go and do things because they don't want to be in the rest of society, whether it's because home life is bad or because they just don't fit in with society, right? So going to like these giant, I don't even want to say all the music festivals, but some of the giant music festivals, most of the giant music, there are smaller ones, and mid-sized ones that I still think encompass some of those values. But most of these big, huge ones are just corporate sponsored, wearing all the clothes everybody else wears, using all the products everyone else uses, a big garbage mess left over. Like there's no mental construct that is different. It's just mainstream. Whereas that mental construct of the person coming into the party in 2001 was completely different.
Yes.
So that's where I think the downfall has happened, in that it's taken like the soul out of it and just made it like part of the machine. So that's why I think that for the soul to come back into it, I think that early elements that had all ages and that had everyone come together needs to happen, because younger people, I think parents are thinking, oh, that negative connotation that you mentioned in the beginning, right? It was younger people doing drugs, staying up to, till 8 a.m, blah, blah, blah. That's all bad. Whereas now there's so many people that have lived through it all, like myself. I actually, I can say, and I've said this very openly for many years, like I've never done any of that stuff, right? Like, so coming to a show like,
and having to be part of it, and it's not your...
Yeah, it was different.
Yeah.
So I actually started throwing my own shows, and it was like, oh, my party has always had a different vibe, because it was like, oh, Matt's working the door. Oh, that means it's Matt's show. Oh, yeah, Matt doesn't party and screw around and get all messed up and blah, blah, blah. So this is going to be a different... People acted differently, right? So, and that was like the explosion that led to the club nights and the record store and people supporting what I was doing. It wasn't because I was doing necessarily one thing, but I was just bringing a different vibe to the table. And I think that that's what the culture, I think all parts of society, but especially music culture, needs to go back to, is that inclusive element, because we talk about inclusion all the time in today's society, but I think we're doing it in a forced way versus like that's just how you should act.
Yes.
Like we should just all treat each other equally. Like that was just like...
That's how we were raised.
What did, like the early rave slogans that was on all the flyers on the bottom was
peace,
plur.
love, peace, love, unity, respect.
Yeah,
exactly.
love, right? Yeah. So it's just so simple. Just treat people good and that's it, right?
Yeah.
So, and anyways,
I think what you did is, where other people were looking at it as this is a great way to party and become popular, is you took it and went, I want to create events and a comfort place. Because I've performed at a lot of raves where, like myself, I don't party, I haven't drank in a long time, and you feel awkward as an artist. There, right? You're just like, it's not... It feels really weird. Like I like the festivals where I can go and we can have a campfire, and you're sitting around the campfire enjoying yourself, and the next day you go and perform, versus having to hear bass until like 8 o'clock in the morning. Like I like my sleep. I'm an old man now, right? So I think the difference between the rave culture and artists who, like EDM artists who can actually make it, is the ones who look at it is, how can I spread to a bigger crowd and base, versus just a rave scene. And you've worked, like you said, you worked at Cato when Datsik Excision and Downlink are all, and Sticky Buds is probably working with you, right, at that time.
I think I'm just going to interject,
no,
because you're right on a really good point that I could make. We'll bring up Jeff Excision for a moment, because when you're saying, I wasn't trying to, I was trying to create events,
culture.
Yeah, so I could very easily see, I did very easily see that Jeff was talented right off the bat. His music production skills, because he was already toying with it at home. So when he was at school, it was clear that he knew what he wanted to do, and he was, out of all the students that I worked with, he was the one that seemed like he had the most business acumen. So we got to know each other a little bit, like through class and then outside of class. And because I was throwing so many events and he was just getting started and I saw that potential, it was like, hey, I honestly don't remember if he asked me or if I asked him or what happened. I think it was probably that he was DJing more and wanted to get out more, but he also wanted to learn more about the production. And it was just kind of like, oh, let's do something together. And because I've always liked mentoring people. I don't like to mentor to say this is how you should do something. I like to mentor to say there are infinite ways to innovate and do something new and to succeed, but there are certain ways that you're gonna fail. And I like to try and teach younger people how to avoid failures and then maybe learn from some of the things that I've learned from. Like, times change and the things that worked in the past might not always work in the future, but generally speaking, what doesn't work always never works because of more so human psychology or like physical logistics. So he got it. We did a bunch of shows together at the German hall, and we ended up bringing, actually one show ended up being, I remember he wants to book the next show, and he shows me KJ Saka from Pendulum, who was just nobody at the time, and he's like, look at this video, this is this drummer, he's in Washington, and this is him at the college radio station, and we're like, wow, right? So we bring him up, and like, that, you know, like very shortly after that was when his career ended up exploding too, right? And then look what Jeff has gone on to do since then, right? Like, even from those little shows, he then went and started his own club night after that. And then from that, he used that to, and every musician has to do this, promoter, whatever, you have to play the game. And he played the game very well with bookings and out-of-town people and how to do all that. And then it just all slowly leveled up, and the rest is history for, you know, and I'm so proud to see that kind of stuff, you know?
I've always wondered if he played locally, because I remember Dadzik playing at a house party once, but and it's funny that it was with you, because I wonder if he would have gone to play with the rave side more, if it would have happened the same way, you know, because he is very business, and he is a genius when it comes to marketing and even performing. The guy's
on the whole
everything,
the band side thing, and then all the costumes, the stage show. Like, my dad being from the music industry from the 80s and the 90s and all those big stage shows, I showed him some of the videos of, you know, those things, and he was always impressed too, right? So like, just hats off to, but you know, like, that's the potential that's there for everybody, but they have to understand that, like, hard work is important. Luck and timing is also very important. The timing for him and dubstep and all that was perfect. It couldn't have been placed any better. A lot of the time for me and my success, I've been too early. I think I would be a far more successful person if at times I wasn't pushing the envelope so hard. And, you know, that's just what comes with making things happen, though. You have to. I'm still happy with the things I've been able to do. Very few people have even got to, you know, who gets to make a living off of music for like 25 years, right?
Honestly.
And still have a family and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So not going to complain about it at all. I'm just saying that there's totally different levels of success, and you have to work hard, but your best sometimes isn't good enough. And it's okay for that to happen. Maybe you need to pivot. Maybe certain elements of the industry are for you or aren't for you. I think that, like, out of all the things in life, even, like, actually DJing, actually in front of a crowd, hands-on turntables, being able to scratch and do all that stuff, I don't know, I think that's maybe why I'm on Earth, right? You know, like, be a good person, family, yada, yada, but like my skill or my whatever, that's actually it. I love producing music and whatnot, but I've had tinnitus as a kid, so I can make music that is good and listenable, that the crowd wants to hear when they're just having fun and they're whatever. But when I send it to friends, it's like, this doesn't sound right, that doesn't sound, like the mix, my mix is crap because my ears aren't right, you know? So I know that the music vibe that I can bring is good, but like my mix down and my production side, even though I've done production stuff, still suffers. So I know I didn't try to stick with it no matter what. I just went, you know what? As much as I'm good at it, I'm going to use that to maybe do more like remixes, edits, mashups. I'll still do some of my own stuff so that I can have original productions, so that like marketing type people, you know, you're not just playing other people's music. But I just used it for more remixing because I know my limit, that my best at production isn't as good as it needs to be to compete with somebody like Tyler or whatever, right? But like DJing, bring it. I don't care who you are. Like I'll play. I've lost gigs with promoters because when I open, I'm just gonna give it my all. And they don't want people to do that often, right? Because when I did shows, I didn't care what time you were booked for. I want you to bring your A game to my party so that everybody that has been there knows, wow, it doesn't matter what time I show up, it's going to be good, right? Whereas if only your headliner is going to slam, that's not, for me as a promoter, it never worked out. So when I as a DJ would go, I'm bringing my A game all the time, Other pivots can be, stage managing, which I like doing. I did Shambhala a bit. I currently am a stage manager at Bass Coast, and I did stage managing for what was the Indigenous Resilience Festival at the Mary Irwin Theatre, Rotary.
Oh, cool.
So that was like 12 hours, 48 performers, switchovers every 20 minutes, I loved it though. And being a stage manager doesn't mean you have to know everything about sound, everything about lights. It means you should know a little bit about everything so you can help troubleshoot. But your job is just to help people do their job properly and keep everyone on time. So that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be the best at anything. You just have to be a good person a good people person, be inclusive, be, kind and respectful to people, like all those things, and then you can have longevity in the industry. Really crappy people seem to make great artists because they're cutthroat and they can do that business corporate side and they can stay in it. But if that lameness ever kind of gets out into the public, especially nowadays, in today's world, then you're done. Whereas good people can have a long road, not just being an artist. You can pivot to other areas. Artist management, maybe you just have been in it in a while and your bros are doing better than you are, but they trust you. So maybe you should do their bookings and help them succeed more. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to just be, I want to be a rapper, I want to be a DJ, I want to be the best soloist or guitar player or whatever, right? Gotta be open to to everything. And then when you are open to everything, you learn more about everything, and then you can deal with those people better. You're going to make better network connections. You're going to get better gigs for yourself by not being closed off. So I'm very expand, share the wealth, share the knowledge. Nothing really, in the arts community, I don't think anything really comes from hoarding too much for yourself, No. Even in stocks and business, it's there's so much money out there. If you see a good chart with whatever, tell your friends, maybe you'll both make money off of it, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That sort of protectionism just doesn't work.
And I think it shines in everything you do, because even online, you're trying to educate people every day, whether it be politically or if it's in stocks or if it's with music. And I see that all the time. And it just shows that your intelligence is more than just one faceted. You know what I mean? You're a multifaceted person, which I think is kind of why you're not cutthroat. Is you're very humble to the core. And it shines in the way you present yourself. And as a promoter, like you were saying, when you're managing artists, 48 acts, our last festival in 2023, we did 22 acts, and there were 15-minute changeovers. And we were 3 minutes behind by the end of the night.
Yeah.
So our team is great with people and fast at what we do. And I think that's the thing, is if it was just me putting I'm the one who does all the bookings, I set up everything. But when it comes to the night, it is not me.
Yeah.
It is my friends, my team, and that's where I think people don't realize festivals, how hard they are to put on. Even just an event with 4 artists.
Yeah.
Meg, for example, is booking a bachelorette party right now. So there's 5 girls and they're all trying to do something. And she's realizing how hard it is to manage 5 girls. And I'm okay, now try 22 bands with 5 members in each band. So then I'm dealing with over 100 people and trying to keep them all happy.
Yeah.
It can also almost be draining when you're having to deal with people who don't take it as professional. Or on a level that you do. Like you said, when you're booking a show, you want everyone to be at their A game.
Yeah.
And as an artist, I've always looked at my performances as set the bar.
Yeah.
Which is like, if I'm opening, good luck.
Yeah,
After,
I know, right? I feel the same way. Good luck.
So it's that's how every artist, I think, should approach their sets, their art. And you were even mentioning production, that like your mixes aren't. I think we're all too hard on ourselves about mixing.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to compete with these electronic artists and metal artists who have like these absolute professional producers with hundreds of $1,000s of gear and plugins and whatever you want to make it sound industry standard.
Yeah.
Music's not meant to sound the same. And this is one thing I can't stand about the metal industry right now, is everything is so the same. Like, you can hear one band, then on cycle, it goes to the next one, you think it's the same band, but it's identical production, identical, like, everything.
The last few years of hip-hop kind of sounds the same way. Mm-hmm. That era of drum and bass, when drum and bass got super popular, but then dubstep kicked in, it was like pendulum blew up. Mm-hmm. But because they got signed to Warner and all that, and they were also good at what they did as well too, their sound was just so incredibly crisp compared to like the indie labels that it was almost like a joke, like throw in the towel, like I can't make anything that sounds like that. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it just sounds so amazing, right? Meh. So,
it is hard.
But you saying that, like, how it shouldn't have that, I don't know, uniformity, mm-hmm. that monotonous. It almost becomes monotonous when it's so perfect, right? And I think that art, what was recently? The Junos were recently. And I really don't like awards. I think because of and I'm only bringing this up because of what you're saying. I don't think, because it shouldn't sound all the same. Mm-hmm. And art, whether it be like a painting, abstract art, a sculpture, DJs, bands, there's so much variety, there's so much nuance, there's so much just difference happening, that like the whole part of the creative process is that it's not a competition. Mm-hmm. Nothing other than like, I want to do the best for touch the mic. I think other than wanting to do the best for yourself, nothing about it is a competition. Mm-mm. So then all of a sudden, the corporate side kicks in, the radio. Back in the day, it was payola, but now there's definitely still other things going on, and bot streams or whatever, BOT or BOUHT, either one, right? So as soon as that art is being made to like make money, it becomes a competition. And then once the advertising dollars are behind it, now we need awards to say who's the best at this so that everybody can sound like blank. Mm-hmm. And then, T-Pain has gone viral many times for just being like, stop sending me this stuff. There's da baby, there's da this, little that, there's little this. There's 5 guys already doing all the music you're sending me. Send me something different, right? Yeah. So it's that same thing. Everyone wants to be, I think it's probably because everyone wants to be famous. Yep. They don't actually want to just express themselves. Maybe that goes back to that earlier question too, and what has happened and what's changed and what's the positive or differences is like, as it becomes more popular and there's more money to be made, you have to have popularity to get that money, to get that market share. And by doing that means different things through different eras. In this era, it means being viral. So now you have to do whatever is necessary to be viral versus just be good and have an awesome manager. Mm-hmm. So yeah. It's
definitely a weird time. And especially like not doing hip hop for 10 years and coming back to it and seeing like what people are doing to get their stuff known. And it used to be like, write a good song, promote it, perform, people would listen to it. Now you see, and like one music video, now you see like 10 different reels for a verse for a single song.
I know, right?
And it's like, it's trying to keep up with that as a full-time job. You're not able to write music. Mm-hmm. So it's, I am still trying to understand how modern day artists are able to manage with children, with jobs and stuff, and still get that out. It's elusive to me.
Yeah, so for me, I did not embrace social media properly when it first started happening. It's not that I thought that it was gonna go away, like, oh, what is this computer thing? I was an all boomer about it, but I didn't really think it was gonna have the overreaching impact onto every part of our, like, it's like every second of our lives, not maybe ours, but like most people's lives is, you know, again, I'm not dancing at the club because I don't want to look stupid. Like all these micro decisions that are being made because of what could happen for social media is terrible. So for me, you know, I didn't expect that was how it was going to go. I didn't expect Facebook and whatever was just going to blow up. So I kind of didn't do that in the beginning and focused on just locking down residencies. So in my first, let's see, Roses started in 2006 maybe, and I was like full-time in 2008. Started DJing in like 97, 98. So for the first 8-10 years, I was just a festival DJ that did the odd nightclub. And then I won the Red Bull 3 Style, and then from winning the Red Bull 3 Style, I was sponsored by Red Bull. So they just got me gigs and took me places to do gigs, right? And one of those happened to be just this thing at Roses one day. I don't know if it was on the patio or on the stage or what it was. And there was a couple of servers that worked there that had seen me play at shows. And they were like, this guy's really good. You should have him back if you can, because he lives in Kelowna. And I think the event, I was playing on vinyl. I don't even think it was Serato yet. And I played a lot of like funk and like just like slam and ravey music. So that made them interested. And then, you know, I met my wife. It's like, you know, you want to get married, you start thinking about a family. Because of my dad's involvement in the music industry, he made it very clear to me, like, you can't have a family and be a musician. Like, you're going to screw one of them up, basically. So don't, like, who was it? Was it the Guess Who? One of them?
I think so.
Left at, like, the band's height of their popularity to go spend more time with his family because he couldn't.
Yeah.
He was missing everything. So I didn't want to miss everything. And I also wanted to have a family. So that Rose's opportunity inadvertently just slowly morphed into this thing where I played once in a while to the Friday guy, to, wait a second, it's way busier when Matt's playing. Let's just give him Friday and Saturday. Holy smokes, a lot of people are coming to, because Roses was like pre-drinks place, and then you'd go somewhere else. And yes, the location was great, but it wasn't a stay place. It was a go, right?
Yeah.
And then it became the place to go. And then once it was the place to go, it was like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then they canned the bands because no bands weren't really generating the, you know, it was like $800 for a band, and they're playing for half the amount of time versus me playing for like a few $100 and playing all night and packing it out the door for, I don't know, 10 years, like, actually, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know how I got on that tangent, but
the keeping the balance between family.
the family life, right? So I put my effort into growing the local residency angle, because I had seen in the UK and in the US that even though there was DJs that toured, the really good ones had things in their local area locked down, and I jumped on that model in the record store era, 2000 to 2004, when we did when Gotch, it was called Gotch's at the time, turned into Sapphire.
Okay.
They had that small second room, smallish. So it was a separate venue at the time, and then they bought it, and there was a door in between. But either way, the point is that we used that as our hub, right, and our local thing. And then when that didn't work out anymore, just I wanted to do more touring and whatever. And then when I wanted to come back, because now family, I just did it again, but with Roses, basically. Okay. So it helped me not do the social media thing. It helped me generate income. It helped me be kind of like the guy. And then from being the guy, I could get other bookings. And then it kept me playing so much. I was getting so much promo materials. I was getting in record pools. So then that then gives me now music that other people aren't playing at all. That's a really interesting one too, as just like a side quest here, is that in electronic music, the unheard song, the dub plates are gold. Like the unreleased music, oh my God, I haven't heard this song. I'm dancing even harder to it, right? Everyone flips out. Whereas with pop music, you know, I didn't play like Miley Cyrus or Taylor Swift, but I did play Rihanna and, stuff that was like more accessible and fun. So I remember getting, what Rihanna song was it? Rude Boy, which is still probably one of her top 5 hits ever. And I saw it in the record pool, listened to it, was like, this is super good. Started playing it, and like nobody danced to it. The video came out a month later and everybody's dancing to it, right? So totally different cultures that way. But so anyways, the local residency is key. And I think that is something that almost nobody does anymore. And whenever I talk to young DJs, whenever I talk to young MCs, good pun there for the older people, and the younger MCs don't even understand that could be an option. Yeah. Like, why don't you, as a rising person, start a night somewhere, and maybe you have a DJ friend that plays the music, and just like have your buddies come out and like just not perform every week, but just like almost, it could even be more like open mic, where you're just coming out and testing out your couple new songs. Do I like doing this? Does it sound okay? Are people going to bob their head to it live before I actually release it? Like, there's so much opportunity there. Nobody does that. Everybody just wants to throw a show. Battles are cool, I get it. I used to, when I did electronic music and all the shows back in the day, I also did hip-hop shows and was in a hip-hop group as well, too.
Oh, sweet.
From the scratching. Yeah, we opened up tons of festivals. We played with the Rascals and Swollen members, like, all the time at festivals. Unfortunately, one of our members got into substances, and that ruined it, which is another thing my dad taught me at a young age, too, is he said you can't have anybody in the band that has like
any issues.
Back then it was more just drinking, right? Rave culture was more drugs, but and you got a bass player that's an alcoholic and your rhythm section is shot. Plus you're all just not getting along. Yeah. So it ended up that it just all blew up, which was unfortunate because like I said, the Rascals were already big. Us and Swollen members were coming up at the same time, and whenever we played shows, like, our response to our music was equal to theirs. Like, it was, we were going places. And we also did hip hop different because I was an electronic music DJ. So I would get our music cut to acetate, to vinyl. So our instrumentals were on dub plate, and when we played live, I knew from playing shows and hosting my own hip hop shows that the crowds don't like it when you take a lot of time in between songs. Mm-hmm. So I DJ'd our hip hop set like it was an EDM show, and I barely gave the MCs time to breathe, or I do a little something in between to let them catch their breath. So our sets were just like bang, 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 and it was always going, and the energy was high. And again, that's something I don't, even to this day, see a lot of hip hop people do. They're chatting, they're like telling stories in between songs to fill their set. I don't know what the point is, I never saw it work. I know people do it, and maybe they think it's part of hip hop culture, but like, if you don't do it, trust me, people will go off harder at your shows. Yeah. Just out of personal experience. I'm not trying to,
no, it's true,
ruffle somebody's style, but like,
it's true. My buddy's dad told us once, and he had worked in the music industry for a long time, that there's a structure to set up your set that will make the crowd love you. Let's give them 3 songs. Take a quick second to talk. Yeah. 2 more songs. Quick second, your last 3 songs. Yeah. And then walk off stage for your encore. Yeah. So that there's those, you only talk to the crowd 3 times. Mm-hmm. And then come back on for your final song.
You can make a connection with them,
but it doesn't need to be every time. Like, and that's where, like, I'm setting up my hip hop sets for our fundraisers, and I time out, like, I set it up in my DAW, perform the first song, see how long I want to talk for, and I put a drone in. So it's not just dead sound and me talking. Like, there's a nice little drone in the background, which is what I've taken from metal, because that is how they do it. There's always a drone, just something going, so that it's not crowd talking and people wondering what's going on. And that's kind of what you got to do as an artist. You gotta fail to become a good artist. You've got to make your little mistakes. And I think it's, especially in hip hop, there's this weird thing that you've got to be like the coolest and the best at what you do. And like when my old record label, I call a record label, just it was a group of us putting out music and us paying for the CDs. But we hosted a ton of hip hop shows, and we started it off small, and that like you did, and it grew and it grew and it grew, and we just worked with 2 venues, bounced them back and forth every month. We did a show, and they kind of worked with us, and that grew to a point where I was opening up for Mercules just before he got big, and Snack the Ripper, and I was on the SDK tour, and then opening up for Masta Ace and Sam and Arm, and like just staying true to yourself and not worrying about what the rest of everyone else is doing, especially hip hop. And I think that's what the top hip hop artists in my mind right now don't do anything that anybody does. Hobson, NF, and now that Snack is sober, Snack is probably one of my favorites, and Merc. And Merc himself has changed over the years because his success is like, it changes as you grow. Most people, like you said, want to be famous. I'm guilty of that. When I did hip hop, I did it for almost 7 years, and I was sponsored by Caribou because that was when Caribou was sponsoring everyone.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right? I drank my face off, and I was really bad, and I had to learn like self-moderation as an artist is the hardest thing to do, especially if you're in environments that are very party-based, so hip-hop and EDM.
Well, and I think also like the dynamically too, like I don't know what it is like in a band, but like in the hip-hop group side of it, as the DJ, I had to be there first, and I had to be there last, and I had to lock it down. There was really no opportunity for me to just go off and be an idiot with the rest of the guys, right? Whereas they, as the MCs, there was like, other than like a little mic check, right? Like, and especially on lower level things, there's not much, it might not even be a mic check before the gig, right? So, so for me, I just always shook my head at that stuff because I'm like packing up and I'm like, come on guys, right?
It's definitely, and I think that's where like, you grow up as an artist and you see like, the 70s rock star mentality. Like they're driving fast cars and they got girls all around. I'm like, that isn't rock star life anymore. Like that's not how hip hop artists work anymore. Like the most successful ones are the ones grinding, and they're in bed by 11 and they're up and ready by 7 o'clock in the morning to go to do their mic checks early and set up their own merch and then go do a meet and greet. And the lifestyle to be a successful artist has changed. It's not just being good. It's being business oriented, confident in yourself, humble when dealing with people, and understanding when to say yes and when to say no. Because you're going to get tossed a ton of shows, but to choose the ones that are going to be like good for your image is really hard to like. When you're getting tossed them all, you just want to accept them all. Which is, I find, difficult, especially with hip hop, because like you're gonna get tossed to some epic shows, but like my least favorite show I've ever performed with was, funny enough, was with Swollen Members, and it was strictly just because of how Shane treated us at the show. And Prev and Robb are amazing, but it was just kind of a weird situation, and also it was like right during the height of Battle Axe Warriors when he was in his own weird phase, but it made me look at like the people I idolize as artists a little bit differently, seeing them behind the scenes.
Oh
right?
Gosh, so DJing, I made the mistake of meeting some of my quote unquote never meet your heroes. That whole quote, right? So there was some DJs that I brought out that were like, hey, wow, he was actually a really great guy, even though he seems like John B from the UK. He definitely is a big personality, but he was a great guy. And then there was other guys that I met at Shambhala when I was kind of like at really like in my sort of like peak drum and bass era. And I'm not going to say who they were, but I'll just, I was like, oh my gosh, it's these guys. I've got so many of the records. I've ordered everything in from the record store. I'm so jacked to meet them. And whenever I meet people, I generally don't like to talk a lot of music, talk a lot of shop. I like to just like meet them, and they respect that so much more. And then you can have a personal relationship. And then when you guys follow up in a month or something after a gig, then you can talk shop, right? yeah, and it's just like, oh, you want to go down the beach and do some cocaine, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, no, you're idiots, like, so I don't, and then on the hip hop side of things, I've seen, again, I won't mention names, but like groups that had the image of being well off. When in fact, I knew from personal, like firsthand experience from playing with them, they took their record advance, they spent it poorly, they misjudged their sales, now they owe the record company money, and they're all living in an apartment together instead of like touring and blah, 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 right? So when that money starts coming in, what you first start doing with it is huge. Another example would be, because you mentioned Master Ace, so you probably know Tyler and Salmon Arm, Abstract Sonnets.
I absolutely love Abstract Sonnets.
He brought me onto the West Ave thing back in the day, and we did a bunch of music together, and we're still friends and whatnot. But when he started really going the European route and playing over there more, something that I was talking to him about, or maybe we were just talking with each other, because he had like I owned a trailer in a trailer park, and he owned a trailer in a trailer park. And most people, that's just dumb. I don't want to live in a trailer park, right?
Genius.
But for us, it was this financial decision of, well, I don't have to pay all this rent. I can pay off my house in like 4 years. I can bank some money. I can do whatever. For us, my wife, it was bank money and sold the trailer, bought a house.
Yeah.
For him, he's gone on to like buy land, and he like
bought a
grows
farm.
vegetables and stuff, right? And he still does his music thing extremely well too, but also has that on the side. And one of the things we were talking about many years ago was like, we joked about it, we probably should have done it, but was setting up something for artists to talk about their future and their financial future, and how are you going to spend your money if you actually start spending their money? Because as you know, I talk about stocks and investments, and it doesn't have to be all just stocks and investments. It could be starting a farm, right? Or whatever it may be. So like when that money, if that money hits your hand once in a real meaningful way, is it grills and a necklace and Hennessy at the show so that people think you look cool, so that they're gonna, like, that's their theory or their hypothesis is, if I look cool, you're gonna think I'm cool, so you're gonna come back, so that we're both cool together. But in reality, most music is very temperamental. It's very like hit and miss in the moment. Maybe you are a one-hit wonder. Maybe you are just going to be a regional artist, whatever that may be. Maybe your best isn't good enough. Back to that whole thing, right? So when that money hit your hand, did you do something with it, or did you blow it and now you're actually in a worse off position? And that's when you see artists, was it the Denise Richardson from En Vogue's lives in her car?
Yeah.
Like, and she tried to paint it as, well, it's a self-journey and I don't really need to. No, you wouldn't if you could. We would all like to live in a, somewhat stable environment. You know what I mean? So you can't, Anyway, it doesn't matter if it's a major label artist or Tyler and Salmon Arm crushing it. The major label artist can drop the ball, and the independent guy can crush it by making good decisions, right?
And that's the thing too. He's a prime example of,
just like Jeff did. They both, made good business decisions.
and that's the hardest thing too, because it's like you're saying, it's almost, you got to be cutthroat, but they're not necessarily cutthroat. They just know yes and no.
Yeah.
They know when to say yes and no to the right choices, the right shows. His ability to go from Salmon Arm and Kelowna shows and like opening slots at Shambhala to sold out shows in Prague. And that was where that was just when I stopped doing hip hop and kind of gave up. Like I was like, I had ruined my opportunity, like you said, when the money hits, what do you do with it?
Gotcha.
I had the opportunity to sign with what would have been Stealth Bomb at the time. They were gravitating from SDK to that. And that was the Bliss and Esso night when they played. And I was supposed to meet the manager, and I drank a little too much, and that was because I realized that I'm not going to sign the record deal. And I was kind of like hating myself, because I was like, I'm not going to take this money and throw it away. So I willingly chose to give up that deal, and I decided subconsciously that I was going to stop doing music and I did for about 10 years. I wrote a solo album that went nowhere. It's on SoundCloud and does nothing. But when I grew up and I realized that to be successful doesn't mean to be famous was probably the biggest click in my brain. So you don't need to have millions of dollars to be successful and live. Because you can be successful living off a minimum wage job, and people have some people have a good life. As long as you're making the number you want, like set yourself that number you want of what covers your bills. Start with that. Go and book 4 shows a month in different areas and make sure that you're covering that amount, whether it's through guarantees or merch sales. Then you've supplemented your income doing what you love.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I think we all initially start and go wrong. And the people who make it successful are the ones who can do that. And that's where what I saw with Tyler is he created a huge following just being a family.
Yeah.
Which came from being a juggalo. But what he did is he created this huge following, and people realized that what he does is more than just music. And I think that's the hardest thing is like you said, people put on this image, especially in hip hop, that you got to be cool and you got to have all these chains and stuff.
Yeah.
No, like my favorite artist, honestly, I just found in the last couple of years, thanks to my old singer from the band, is NF. Why I gravitate towards him mostly is because he's not about fame and fortune and bling and that. Like doesn't like himself.
Yeah.
He doesn't like the fame, how quickly it came. And he has a hard time like dealing with it, but he's also doesn't swear. He doesn't do anything, like no drinking, no drugs, you know what I mean? Like, he takes it he looks at it like an artist. It's not just like, I'm a party animal or anything. And I think that is the key to being successful as a musician. Like, you went with residencies.
Yeah.
Hip hop, you can find your local venue. You just book shows. Don't overbook, because that's when people don't want to come. But like every other month, maybe do a hip hop show and don't perform the second one.
Yeah.
And you slowly build your following, and then eventually that following is, you can make one fan, that fan has 10 friends that they'll show.
Yeah.
And vice versa. If you upset a fan, that fan has 20 friends who they'll show.
Which is why I always did the door at my own shows and did a lot of things like that, because it's me setting the tone. It's me setting, like, what is the expectations with that vibe, right? I think that's like a good segue too, because I mentioned when we first sat down, the Buddha here on the table. And I follow like Sikhism, Sikhi, whatever you want the term you want to use. And I think that like one's mental outlook is super important. Like, you could be, I think, just like scooch off from music here, because like that whole, I think that is what determines that ability to grow something. That determines a person's ability to just be okay with their best not being good enough and still get up every morning to get good, to either make that thing that's not as good better, or to focus on the parts of you that are better. So it doesn't matter if it's working on yourself with music, or if it's working on yourself emotionally, or working on yourself within the community. Like, that's another thing too, is like I try and help out. I try to mentor or do a lot of like lessons and things for like youth groups and stuff like that over the years. I've done a lot. I just think that it's so important that, like, right back to that first thing about initial rave culture versus corporate now, like, it's all just about bringing people in this inclusive, like, positive way. And I think that that's very lost in today's society. And as like you mentioned with how I post on social media, I consider myself a political atheist, even though like I was I was once the 4-term president of the NDP in the area and ran for the party. And that's because I am very left-wing in my social beliefs in terms of being able to help society, but I'm very right-wing in my economic beliefs, and that I think that we need to be responsible, and that if you take from tomorrow too much, you're left with nothing one day in the future. So, and that's kind of my falling out with politics, is you have to be too ideologically rigid and you have to toe the party line. You can't say we need to be flexible because society is flexible. It's just you're a Democrat and these are the rules you have to follow. You're a conservative, so these are the rules you have to follow.
Yeah.
As the person voting for one of those, you can have mixed beliefs, you know, and you're just picking sometimes the lesser of two evils, which I don't also agree with. But like to be part of the system, you have to do everything that your group says.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in groupthink that way. I believe in groupthink, I guess, in that I think we're all the same thing, right? Whether it's like my, not religion, but way of life looks at it almost like, I think, the simulation theory, which is that we're all connected, we are all one, this illusion, this reality is an illusion. That's what like Buddhism, even like elements of Christianity talk about illusionary aspects, right?
Yeah.
And when I had lots of Punjabi friends growing up and grew up with the culture and whatnot, and then coming back to it like 20 years later, I'm like, oh, they believe in one God, like the number one. They don't say there's O-N-E God, there's one God in the universe and then that's the only God. They say one, as in that's it, like oneness, as in unity. And then in today's modern era, it's like, everything's an illusion. We're all connected. We all come from the same spot, and there is only one. If I came from somewhere and was trying to describe a computer as there is nothing or there is one, that's all a program is. There's zeros and there's one. There's either nothingness or there's oneness, right? And so whether it's like my oddball beliefs have really impacted how I treat people and my kind of try to stay down the middle. I try to be unbiased. We all have opinions, but you know, I try to put my bias aside to just like treat everyone equally. And I think again, that just all helps an artist have longevity in the industry. Maybe your time as an artist is done, but you've been a good guy and you've made lots of connections. You can be a stage manager. You can be an A&R. You can be an actual just a manager of an artist or a group of people. You could start your own agency, a record label, whatever it may be, right? But being a jerk and trying to be the coolest guy, I never see those guys last. They often make a bunch of money because they're cutthroat and they can just play the game with no emotional attachment, right? But for the rest of us that actually generally care about how the world plans out, right? Be a good guy or girl or woman or man or whatever. And I just think that like it comes to you. I don't know, I've just seen that happen a lot, especially as a parent. As a parent, when the kids do something stupid, it usually backfires. It's like we say these things to whether a person is going, you know, just as regular person, or they're a churchy person, or they've gone to rehab. Like all these different parts of society say kind of the same thing, but differently. And then I always see the same things play out with the kids, you know, like, and the more they're on, you know, the computer, the crankier they are. The more they play games, the more they're going to argue with each other. The more they spend time with each other, the more they respect each other. The more that they like play together and deal with their problems, the more they're able to like deal with, you know, a bad feeling one day. Whereas if they're just like eating sugar and fighting games and blah, 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 then they're crying and having a meltdown too. Yeah. It's like, it's all just tied in. So
it is. Children are, music is one level, but children are a whole other thing, man. Becoming a parent has been like mind-blowing. I also think it's helped a lot.
Absolutely.
With like the way I look at how I write and how I have to like present myself. And now being a promoter, like your dad worked in the industry, so you got to watch the industry side of it. And like you said, it caused split, and like he had mentioned that, you know,
sorry, that shouldn't have
no worries. Mentioned that like he said that you can't do both family and music. And my biggest goal in life right now for the last 4 years is showing my kids that you can do whatever you want. It just doesn't come free. Like, they watch me work 7 days a week doing what I love because I want to get it done. the sacrifice is, luckily I can work from home, so I can be here and do everything. But the main goal for me is, like, if you guys want to be an astronaut, it's going to take a lot of work. You want to be a millionaire, it's going to take a lot of work. I just want to make music and build community within the Okanagan. And it's kind of like, I always realized I always wanted to be a touring artist. The older I get, after
I hated touring. It made me very run down. I got really sick. I almost actually got a pancreatic cancer. But I didn't drink and party and do crazy things. So the doctor was like, I think it's just like your life, like your lack of sleep, your traveling, the crappy food you got to eat at the airport, the tour, the bus station. There's a lot of bus stations back then because electronic music wasn't really like flying also. But yeah, it's hard.
It is.
Life. It's not. I don't care what anybody says, like touring,
unless
I guess you're a rare person that likes that. I got very played out very quickly.
Yeah, I did a week-long tour with hip-hop, and I was sick for 3 weeks after. And it was probably because of a lot of the drinking, but like just the eating gas station food, no sleep. It's very hard on you, and then you're also away from your family, which is the other hard part. Like, you're like, oh, I just drove 16 hours away from my family to play for like 10 people at a festival that no one knows, right? So like,
the bad gigs are always...
Those are the no's and the yeses.
The no's and the
I mean,
yeses.
like, they'll pay you $2,000 to go there, but morally, was it worth it?
Another interesting thing that I noticed in my life that very few other people that I've talked to have experienced with DJing or music is, because I did have like 3 kids, so I have now 12, 10, and 8.
Okay.
And so because I had the residency and I could stay and not tour as much, I didn't have to, and my wife had a pretty good job too, so we were able to do it, that we didn't have to do daycare. And that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And hundreds of thousands of dollars is the down payment on a house. It's like there's all these micro decisions that we make, so buying the trailer and not renting. So now all of a sudden we don't have all these huge rent payments, and I'm going to build equity after like 4 years. Being able to play more locally and not have to farm out my kids' behavior and childcare to somebody else. I get to influence them more. I get to learn more about myself. Like, as a parent, those early years, I realized, like, I did make mistakes. As a parent, you're going to probably screw up the most when they're little, which sucks. And, I'm just going to be flat out. A lot of people in the music industry come from not very good upbringings. There's something about neurodiversity and creative people that is just one and the same. The most creative people are usually the most oddballs, and oddballness is 80% hereditary. So chances are you came from a family that was like that, and chances are it was a family that didn't recognize it, because we haven't really, until like the last 15 years, given it any real push in society. So you have all these people that have come from often abusive, whether it's verbally, emotionally, or physically, homes, and most of us start slowly playing out all those bad decisions that our parents did. But part of like being a strong person is also like working on yourself, and it was those early years of watching my own bad decisions made me go, oh, I can get help for this. I can actually become a better person. Don't be afraid to go to therapy, because you actually want to make something better for yourself. There's nothing wrong with how I always equate it to people was like, I didn't even realize anything was wrong, and then I saw myself making the mistakes that my parents made. I didn't want to do that. How do I not do that? So I looked at it as a very simple way. If you want to be a carpenter, you have to be taught how to be a carpenter properly, whether it's going to school or apprenticing with the right person, and you have to have the right tools for the job. If you don't have the right tool, any DIY person that you want to install new baseboards in your house, if you have the right tools, bang, 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 it's done. If you don't have the right tools, your baseboards aren't going to look very good, and it's going to take way longer. Go to the therapist, talk to them a little bit, get some new tools, try out those tools. If you're already in a headspace where you want to just be better, whether it's for your family or for your career or just for you, then you're going to get better because now you have the tools, now you have the training, now you've whatever. Your parents couldn't do it. They did not have the training. They did not have the tools. We don't need to focus on that anymore. We can actually do that. And that would be something, you know, if the interview were to end now, where I'm glad I get to speak on that, because that's like an unspoken thing in the music industry, is that most of us are pretty weird. And most of the people that we've seen over the years, like Leonard Cohen had all his money stolen from his manager, that Denise Richardson from En Vogue, living in her car, got screwed over by the record. All these record labels and managers screwing over people. Why? Because they're bad people that have their heads on, that are looking at people that are either vulnerable or just talented. They're just talented. They know nothing about the business. They don't know how to say yes or no. They don't know anything about anything. They just have this raw talent, and people are going to take advantage of it. So any artists that are listening to this, you know, there's probably an 8 out of 10 chance that you're kind of a little quirky. And I'm one of them. Go with it. Like, that's what makes us be able to do it. And often it's that like endless drive of that quirkiness that makes you be able to get up every day and try again, even though you might not be good at it, right? So, but along with that is, don't let that quirkiness wreck other decisions. Don't let it lead to alcohol and drugs that then ruin your opportunities, right? And those are only things that, you know, some of us get to learn along the way. Some of us learn it and then catch it, and some of us have to fail and then get back up and just try again, right? And even if you failed, I've seen many artists that I know end up living on the street in East Van. And I've seen other artists totally get it together and crush their lives. Whether it be in music, or now they own like a crazy, they've gone to school and now they have a construction company and they make millions of dollars a year. Like, the point is your quirkiness is your drive, but it can also be your downfall. So like, just like you have to learn how to play the guitar or learn how to scratch daily, just learn how to work on yourself a little bit daily. And that's why I mentioned again the Buddha and the Sikhism thing and all that, because a lot of that is about introspection, right? And it's not just about reading a book and then going to a temple or a church and doing a thing. You actually have to live it every day. And I think once you start living these things every day, we can be better people every day.
Therapy was definitely the biggest help for me. For years, I had a very bad temper. And it was just because I had a quick fuse, and it was just being taught reactions like that. Like, you watch your parents and the reaction comes up. So for me to willingly look at myself outside of the bubble and to see myself and be like, hey, go get help, it really helped me. And it's helped me mainly with dealing with people. I love to debate and have conversations that people don't like to have. And I always got told I was
too pushy or something.
Not too pushy, but like I get worked up, and it's passion. It's like I'm passionate about something, but it seems like it's anger or. But it's just trying to like reel that in, and understanding really helped me be a better person, a better friend, a better lover, and a better just for the community in general, because now I can approach a situation with 22 bands and 100 artists and not get flustered. I can take the 2 seconds to sit back, take the deep breaths, work with my tools that I was given to fix the situation if anything bad comes up. So I'm really good on my feet now when detrimental things happen. I'm very good at being able to just work through it.
And I feel it's super positive to talk about these kind of things, because so many other people just from me, again, I have talked about those things on social media. I've had tons of people reach out and just be like, I've tried and I've failed, but hearing you talk about it makes me want to just try and go back again. Or I haven't tried before, like I'm kind of scared to try. What do I try in this process? And, the whole modern, men and talk masculinity and yada, yada, yada. Men can still be masculine, powerful people, but dial back our emotions, right? So, the arts community is a great opportunity to talk about that without having to kind of be like, this is weird, because again, it's a lot of quirky people and they want to talk about weird things, and they do want to talk about their feelings. Who wants to talk about feelings more than an artist or a songwriter? Come on, right? Exactly. Like that's all they're doing, is they're writing words about their feelings. So
No, it's true. And I think that, like, I am a very, very big advocate of male mental health awareness and have been since the beginning of Enigma. It's something that I've always been open about, and my lyrics have always been about. And it's kind of, as an artist, like you said, from people who are brought up from homes where they're maybe not heard, when you write a song and somebody gravitates toward that, they naturally become family.
Yeah.
And as people who, some people, like a lot of artists, don't have families, that fan base becomes your family. And music is such a magical thing. It's kind of, there's no words that can really describe, I always talk about this in the interviews, there's no words that can really describe that emotional, spiritual element of music. There isn't. There's no English word, at least and I don't know other languages, but there's probably a word in a different language that would translate well.
Because music it's something about, like, when I'm playing a set and like everything feels good, whether it's live or especially at home. When it's live, I just choke it back. Mm-hmm. But when I'm at home and I'm just like locked into the zone, doing like practicing for something, like I can like have tears in my eyes because everything is so sonically like beautiful. Mm-hmm. And when you're actually in the flow, and when people know what the flow is, you know what I'm talking about, and you're in a different, you're not grounded in reality in that moment. And that's that thing that we also want to bring to the crowd when we're playing too, right? So if we can't feel it ourselves, how can we possibly bring that out to everybody else, right? You got to be willing to feel those emotions and do, so that you can then bring it out and everyone feels it. And that just goes back to the community thing that we're obviously both about.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for doing this. I really appreciate your input and getting to dive into the history, because there's somebody that we've always been friends on Facebook for years and never actually got to meet in person and chit chat. So an incredible mind. So I want to thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries. We'll catch you guys next time.